Apex software for the Lancaster Police Department due to a sole source provider. And that's coming from the Safety Committee. Councilman Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, as the resolution says, this is to get a new 911 system software in for our 911 center. Current software is at end of life. Because it's at end of life, that's why the Safety Committee, we did discuss this and we did agree in the committee that this would be best for the public safety of the residents of Lancaster, that this be a one-read item. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay. Any comments from council about the one reading? Okay, thank you.
And Council Member Tiener will be my second on that one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item, temporary resolution 19-25, a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding and enter into a contract with the Axon from the Source Cooperative Purchasing Program and to declare an emergency. Also coming from the Safety Committee, Councilman Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, this is to allow for the police department to go out and purchase cameras for their police cruisers. Currently, right now, there aren't any in our police cruisers. So once again, by providing this service, essentially by getting the service and providing these cameras, our police officers will be able to document every interaction that they have with the public, therefore protecting not only the police officer but also the public as well, in addition to helping out with prosecutions on the local level. So with that being said, it was once again decided in Safety Committee, and we're going to ask for a one reading on this piece of legislation due to the urgency of this matter. My second on this is going to be Mr. Solly.
Okay, so help me understand the urgent matter.
Yes.
When we haven't had these for years, this is the first time we're going to have them.
I mean,
why couldn't we go two readings?
Yeah, I mean, Chief Snyder. Thank you.
Thank you, members of council. The one reading was asked for in Safety Committee simply for efficiency because Axon supplies cameras for all the police vehicles throughout the nation. If we were to get authorization at the time of Safety Committee, the earliest they could put us in there is late June. Now we're probably looking at maybe July-ish, and by the time this is done and the referendum's passed, I would think maybe July, August. So it wasn't demanded in Safety Committee, nothing like that. I just said for efficiency's sake, since it's in this year's budget, if we would be able to do that. Also, at the first of the years when we first contacted them to try to get this ball rolling, and the quote that they gave us is expiring here relatively soon. So we acted on it as soon as we could, and the one reading again was to get on their schedule. Otherwise, we'd be waiting well into fall.
So, Chief, I noticed that the contract seems to escalate year over year over year. What kind of negotiations took place related to the contract price and working with the vendor to see what you could do to keep that under control?
Negotiations as far as the video cameras?
Yeah.
So we're already at a 34% discount if we were to buy our body cameras all together at once. We're probably around a 40% discount with the tasers included that on the main package. And on this particular add-on with the Axon fleet system, I believe, although don't mark my words, it was anywhere between the 15 to 17% range that we got a discount on the Axon fleet cameras from their retail pricing for adding those into the bundle.
These monies in the 2025 budget?
Yes.
Okay, this is all.
It was a budget. It was a budgeted item. It's just we weren't expecting the delay in scheduling at all.
Okay.
Are you going to speak? I saw you adjust.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Well, I can. Everybody wants to hear me. This is the thing I can tell you about Chief Snyder. He goes about 3 or 4 different ways to get the best deal. He always does. And the police department needs this. I mean, it's with everything that's been going on in the world lately and the way, the city is and that. I think we need to move ahead with this. And, we vote for other things that nobody bats an eye at. And this is for the police department, so.
I appreciate that. I think that's a great approach to it, and we do want our safety forces to have what they need. The concern comes from, especially with cameras, and I think the chief's probably aware of this, once we start having these contracts with folks, the costs escalate year over year over year. We have to get it at the beginning as to the best price. The other thing is, when you have these cameras, it escalates public records requests for those, and it involves quite a bit of cost to redact certain things that shouldn't be in those. How do we handle that, Chief?
One correction I would make is the price does not increase year over year. It's a flat price, and I believe a couple of these years will actually decrease in the 5-year total once we get our discounts in. The quote that they sent doesn't reflect all of the discounts that will materialize over the 5-year period. The second portion of that is Axon staying in their ecosystem. If we were to bump out to another ecosystem, that's a whole other piece of redaction software that our clerks would have to learn and deal with. Axon right now, if we receive a records request, already uses AI for the majority of the removal of, say, image blurring, face blurring, child blurring, all of those instances. So I'm not here to say it's easy to redact, but I don't see a large increase in redaction load just with adding in-car video. A lot of the public records request that comes in is person-to-person or peer-to-peer with the body camera. The car, you're going to get a lot of engine idling and out-of-earshot type audio. So this is mainly having to do with vehicle interactions, which we have no record of right now because where our officers wear their body cameras currently, the only place that they can wear them is on their chest. When you're sitting in a vehicle, it's a really good recorder of the steering wheel, but not anything to do with the vehicle interaction. So any safety concern, if a person were to aggress an officer, shoot an officer, stab an officer, someone to take off running from a vehicle, any of those things, none of that, precursor information, furtive movements, none of that would be available via recording device.
Okay. So I want to go back to one thing that you did say. You said that these prices are going to go, maybe even go down. What you've listed here, what is listed for us this evening, is a year one price of over $48,000, a year two price of over $49,000, a year three price of over $51,000, year four over $53,000, and a year five over $56,000.
That's correct.
So those are the prices, and they are going up. Is that correct?
For body camera. We have a three-piece contract with Axon that includes taser and body camera and fleet vehicle. I'm sorry, I said for body camera. That's for fleet vehicle. But we have a three-piece contract with them. And as those years go on, there is a chance that they flatten out.
Okay.
Any other comments? We've got another one here. Excuse me, temporary resolution 20-25, a resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding and enter into a contract with Montrose Ford for the purchase of 4 police vehicles for use by the Lancaster Police Department. Again, coming from the Safety Committee. Councilman Bizjak.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. My second will once again be Councilmember Teener. This resolution is once again looking to lease 4 cruisers from Montrose Ford up in Northeast Ohio. I know we had 3 cruisers last year that were involved in accidents and were totaled. And obviously, police cruisers are used on a much more regular basis, and they tend to tire out a little bit earlier. So this is addressing that need within the city. And we're going to go 3 readings on this one, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? You good? Next item is temporary resolution 21-25, a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend certificate with the county auditor in the general fund 1001. Finally, from Safety Committee, Councilman Bizjak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, this is to amend $200,000 into the already $1 million allocation for the HVAC system. That $200,000, I do want to emphasize to council, this is not new money. This is not a new appropriation. Essentially, what happened was last year, under last fiscal year, only $800,000 of the $1 million was spent. $200,000 was left over. As the appropriating authority, we need to reappropriate that additional $200,000 into the $1 million that's already there. So money's already budgeted, the money's already taken care of. This is not new taxpayer dollars being used. It's just seeing out the completion of the project. And once again, we're asking for 3 readings, and Councilmember Solly is my second.
Okay. Are there any cost, are these fixed price contracts, any excess surprises of money?
None that are anticipated at this time, Chief Snyder. Just want to double check me there. I don't believe we're anticipating any surprises.
Part of the bidding process was a 10% overage regardless, so there's some protections already built in there. And right now, they're already into the guts of the system, and they don't see anything in the foreseen future as far as a big problem. We are in the phase where we're taking equipment out and putting equipment in. All of the guts, all of the tearing out, all of the rerouting has been done, and that's the most likely area that you'd find a change order, and we survived all of that without any issues. So I can't promise 100% there won't be something, but we're looking very good right now.
Appreciate it, thank you. Other comments, questions? Next one is temporary resolution 22-25, a resolution to approve the then and now certificate for payment of bills in the General Fund 1001 and the Police and Fire Fund 2047. You do have one more. Safety Committee, Councilman Bizjet.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, Councilmember Tiner will be my second on this one. However, I do want to clarify that this will be for one reading. We will be asking for suspension as opposed to 3 readings. Reason for that being was these 2 purchases were made on a credit card, and at the request of the city auditor, just to make sure we meet our financial obligations as a city, we will request that this then and now be approved for 1 reading. I don't know, Auditor Nettles, if you want to add anything more onto that.
Yes, this is the first of the year invoices that came in, which are standard invoices, but with the changeover in staff fire department, it kind of got missed, and it's one of those of not knowing what you don't know. But using the city's PNC credit card for these invoices, they paid them in January, and those monies, PNC Bank is now coming and taking those monies out of our bank account in February, and I can't process the expenditures without the then and now, which if I don't process them in February, will make me out of balance with the treasurer.
Which is bill in hand, and that's.
Correct.
We have to do that. Excuse me. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Moving on to temporary resolution 23-25, a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund 8034, complete a fund transfer, increase receipts, and appropriate in the Cemetery Fund 2007, and amend certificate of other sources and appropriate with the county auditor, Public Works. Councilman Tiner.
Yes, Tim Dietz. Oh, there he is. You're on the other side of the room. I didn't see you. I'll let him explain this.
Excuse me.
This is the piece I alluded to last council. This is the resolution to move some money out of the perpetual care fund into the cemetery fund so we can take care of those 3 projects we have going on, two out at Maple Grove and 1 at Forest Rose. I sent you an email Thursday or Friday, kind of detailing how I approached the investment committee. So give you a chance to look at it. If there's any questions, I can answer those. Basically, we just want to get some roads paved out at the Maple Grove Cemetery around a new section, get a new storage facility built out there, and re-roof the mausoleum out at Forest Rose. In a nutshell.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions?
You did say Councilman Luchtenberg is the
Yes.
second.
Yeah, we discussed this in depth at our last Public Works meeting in January, so it's in the
It can go
minutes.
3 readings for just.
Yep.
Perfect. And I will say, unless it's changed, I was out a few weeks ago visiting graves. And I saw the road, I drove on the road, it definitely needs paved. And I saw 1 grave site occupied, all alone by itself.
We just laid that out last fall, and we've sold several graves, and that was the first burial in that section.
Yeah, yeah. Very good.
As they say, if you build it, they will come, and if you lay it out.
Well, let's slow that down a
Not
little
that.
bit.
Not that one.
Okay,
I don't think they meant that.
Thank you.
That was a good one, though.
Next one, temporary resolution 24-25, a resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding for a sole source provider for corrosion inhibitors. Water Pollution Control Committee, Councilman Wing.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is to designate the CARES Corporation as the sole source provider for our corrosion inhibitor, and we'd like to have Darren Drum come up and speak more to this.
Yeah, I'm requesting legislation to waive competitive bidding and sole source corrosion inhibitor through CARES Corporation. The Division of Water has fed this CARES product to our distribution system since 1996. For almost 30 years, this product has consistently delivered excellent, reliable corrosion control to our distribution system. Additionally, the EPA requires prior notification before a water system can change its corrosion inhibitor. And under these regulations, a water system must perform water quality sampling, which proves the new product meets all the quality standards and does not upset our distribution system. Also, CARES is the only bidder of bulk supply for this product. CARES also supports us in coupon sampling. That ensures the product that we provide works correctly. If water quality changes and adjustments are needed, they will guide us to use a compatible product to ensure optimal corrosion control that will not disrupt our system. We got 200 miles of pipe, and we really don't want to have an upset on our system. We don't want to be another lead or Flint, Michigan. Over the last 30 years, our PWS has not exceeded the 90th percentile for lead and copper, showing CARES's reliability. With the new water treatment plant coming online this year and having a different treatment process in the Miller plant, the Ohio EPA may require us to adjust our blend ratio. If this happens, I would prefer to stick with CARES since they have consistently supported us over the last 30 years. In the last 15 years, they have proven with two managers through CARES that they have demonstrated the stability and professionalism of this company and its product. CARES keeps its pricing down with its 100 years of manufacturing experience, which has kept their costs competitive. They're the largest NSF certified supplier of phosphate. CARES prides itself in being not just a chemical supplier, but also an industrial leader in support and research and product application. Most of CARES's phosphates are produced in Illinois and North Carolina, allowing redundancy in the supply of this critical chemical needed in our treatment process. The risk of switching corrosion inhibitors are compatibility issues and decreased corrosion protection. Different corrosion inhibitors may not mix well, potentially creating precipitants or reducing their effectiveness when combined in our distribution system. Some inhibitors can destabilize existing deposits in our system, causing them to slough off and potentially block pipes or other components. This is why I'm requesting to sole source our corrosion inhibitor through CARES Corporation. Do you guys have any questions?
And we can go 3 readings on this, and Councilwoman Tiner will be my second.
Great. No other comments, questions, anybody? Thank you.
Thank you.
Temporary Resolution 25-25, a resolution to authorize Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a City Hall renovation project coming from Finance Committee. And Councilman Solly will be my second, and there'll be 3 readings. And Service Safety Director, would you like to make some comments?
Absolutely, thank you. I think that many of you will recall that the city hired an architect back in 2020 to evaluate and assess City Hall and what all needed to be fixed in our City Hall. In 2021, the architect Schooley Caldwell gave us an assessment, and at the time, it was just under a $14 million project with all of the updates and renovations and rehab that needed to be completed in City Hall. What they did is they separated it into what needed to be fixed on the outside versus what needed to be fixed on the inside. So in 2020, at the beginning of 2024, we put together an internal committee of myself, Mayor McDaniel, City Auditor, Treasurer, President Porter, Finance Chair Wolfinger, and Pro Temp Corey Schoonover to start discussing what we could do, how we could do it. We know that City Hall, if you've been inside, you can see that the walls are starting to crumble on the inside because of the water damage that's seeping through the exterior of City Hall. So we've applied for a few grants to help renovate the bell and clock tower. We applied for a grant to help with replacing some of the windows. However, that barely covers the cost of the renovation. So I did include with this request for legislation an updated estimate from the architect, Schooley Caldwell. We decided that we just want to work on fixing the outside of City Hall right now and really focus on that. And then once we can get the exterior repaired and renovated, then we will start looking at what we want to do on the interior and hopefully be able to do most of those projects in-house to save the city some money over several years in the future. At this point, to fix the exterior of City Hall, we are looking at the architect's estimate of $6.6 million, just over. And again, this was provided to you with the request for legislation. And I think that pretty much sums it up, but I would be open to any questions.
Service Safety Director, when you say renovate, what we're really talking about is trying to make
Repairs.
this weather tight, have no leaks in the roof, have no walls falling down, and having windows that are not falling apart. Is that correct?
Yes. So not only are we getting water damage from the roof, we're also getting water damage that's seeping through the sandstone into the walls. We're also getting water damage that's coming in off of the alley that sits behind City Hall. There's a small alley. There's water damage coming in through that alley and also crumbling the walls that are underneath the alley there. So it's going to be an extensive repair situation to fix all the water, to fix where all the water is coming in through City Hall. But in addition, like you did mention, the windows are extremely old and most of them are not functional. They don't work. And the ones that are working, we still have a lot of air movement coming through. They are not energy efficient at all. And then the other thing that is interior, that's not exterior, but we are going to also include in this project is the elevator. The elevator was installed in 1950, was it 4 or 59? It was in the 50s when our elevator was installed. And as Councilman Kreitz can attest, it breaks often and people get stuck inside of our elevator. So we really need to update our elevator so people will stop being held hostage in our elevator.
I had a question.
Go ahead, please.
Me first?
Sure,
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just looking through this and I had a question about the windows. How much of this work are you wanting to be a restoration to look, you know, what it looked like 100 years ago? Or is it possible to put vinyl windows in instead of the wooden historic windows?
So the architect is trying to be a little more historical accurate.
Mm-hmm.
This has already gone through the Historic Commission,
Yeah.
and so what was approved was the wooden windows.
Okay.
And also with the wooden windows, although vinyl can be cheaper in the long term from a maintenance perspective, the wood windows actually last longer and require less maintenance.
Okay.
Are they aluminum clad on the exterior and then stained wood on the interior? Is that what we're getting?
Steve, I do not know the answer to that question,
Typically,
but I'm happy to find out for
They're
you.
wood windows. There's no aluminum clad on the exterior.
so we're painting the exterior of these. Okay,
I believe so.
I believe they will be stained,
Less
yes.
Maintenance.
okay.
And that is less maintenance?
Correct.
They say, okay.
Who on the committee has any construction background? That reviewed the,
Well, we've got an
And-
architect that the council paid for to do it for us. So
Pardon
what are you
me?
asking?
Pardon me?
Who on the committee has architectural background?
No. Is there someone on the committee, serving on the committee, that has construction background that could ask the kinds of questions that she just asked? I have questions. I don't want to take all night doing it, but.
Council was
I-
represented on the committee. You're welcome to ask your questions, but we had council representation on the committee, and we asked questions, and we made changes, and we've done a lot of work. That's why we can't have 10 members on the committee from council, because that would be inappropriate. We had to pick who we could represent council, and they did.
We have people in the community that I would probably consider experts on renovating old buildings.
We actually have had those people. Marjorie Trishman was involved.
Yes.
Yes, we've had architects, local people involved, local engineers.
And I think that they were all involved when when the original assessment was being conducted back in 2020, 2021. However, I will say that we did hire a facilities manager who does have historic preservation background, and he does specialize in historic preservation. So he's also been going over the drawings and the specs.
So does he have the authority or the ability to change anything or recommend any changes before we head down this road?
I mean, he can, but I guess I would maybe just be curious as to what your questions would be specifically, because it has already been approved by the Historic Commission.
Well, I feel like having another set of eyes on this with specific background in renovating old buildings. I'm trying to not drop names here, but I did discuss this with that person, and I'm just going to tell you that he had questions about the costs of some of these things, and I think you're explaining one of them, the fact that the windows, how did he put it? Very high. The cost is very high, but you're looking at all wood windows, and that's what happens. And my guess is that you're probably talking prevailing wage too. So that is a big cost factor that he's never had to contend with.
Correct.
You have no choice
Yeah.
you have to
I
have
get that.
prevailing wages.
Yeah, and again, we will be going out to bid, so, I mean, we are hoping to get competitive pricing when we go out to bid.
Okay.
So this will be bid out, and
So Larry, that original committee had, Marjorie's the only name that comes to me, but there were at least 3 citizens with expertise in building and engineering involved. And it was actually Marjorie that walked me through the building and showed me the crumbling basement wall. So there has been an effort to involve citizens into this discussion and get experts in the field to help offer information. Certainly, the more experts and the more information we have, the better we are. I would agree with that. But it has happened, and I would give credit to Paul Martin and Mayor Shuffler, because they actually brought them on board, and they were they saw this same information, and we spoke about each item one by one, wood windows. I mean, every single item went in there. I can show you my workup. I had a check mark or a question mark beside everything. So we have asked a lot of questions. We're still open to all the questions you have. Hopefully get you the answers that you would like to have. But this hasn't just been done by the committee that was mentioned, but it was also done by others involved
Okay.
prior to that.
All right, thank you.
I just wanted to add to your original, because of your original question, so I don't have any construction experience, but I can tell you that this version of the committee was kind of brought on by SSD Woody. Like, we continue to have Schooley Caldwell on retainer, or we were paying them a fee continuously and nothing was happening. So it was kind of like, okay, we need to look at it and decide, are we moving forward, or are we going to cut them loose and not move forward? So I think a lot of it was kind of already like what you're asking on who put their 2 cents in. When it came to the current makeup of the committee, it was like all of that stuff was already gathered. So it was, do we come to council with like the whole project all at once, what was the total of that?
in 2021, it was just under 14 million.
So it was, do we as the committee currently, like, it was kind of a big discussion on, do we break it down into smaller chunks that we could handle and manage better? in terms of the cost is really what we were discussing in the current makeup of the committee. So anyone having construction experience or restoration experience wasn't really what we were discussing. We were looking at what Schooley Caldwell had already brought to the table, and were we going to continue down that path and break it up into smaller chunks? Because I think my original statement to the committee was, well, if we're going to come and ask for $21 million, I'm a hard no. So it was like, how do we break it up? And then what was the best way to, so this piece being, okay, let's get the building watertight before we start spending additional money on the inside was where we were. So
It's common sense.
no construction experience except common sense in terms of which part do we want to pare it down to start with first. So,
All right. Thank you.
yep.
I think I would just have a concern with painting or staining exterior wood. That's going to be an ongoing maintenance issue that we're going to have to be prepared to pay for and stay on top of, versus an aluminum clad wood window, which has a wood interior but a protected exterior. Big red flag in my mind, but
We can certainly follow up on that. And we have the same concerns, and the committee had the same concerns on the windows. The windows were a big discussion. And, you know, we're being told by experts in the field that the wood is the better window, you know. We also have, in my opinion, a duty to maintain the historical nature of the building. So a lot of the things that you'll see are restoring or renewing in the most or the best way possible what was there in 1897. There are certainly upgrades because we have better technology, we have some better material, but, and also I would say the Historic Lancaster Commission has guidelines that that they can look at. They're not experts either, but they have a significant volume of material they look at and help us, guide us with materials and type of restoration and what can be done, what should be done. Slate restoration for slate roofs, that type of thing. A lot of other things. The original 1897 version of that building to the best we can, right? Restore it to the best we can. A note of this cost, you know, $175,000 will be a state grant for the clock bell tower. We will definitely look at the windows because I think your point's well taken, but we'll get an answer.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Go ahead.
So about, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, I can't even remember when it was, Paul Martin was sort of safety director, and we renovated the utilities collection office over there. It was supposed to cost $40,000 and it ended up being over $81,000. So at that point, did they get new windows at that point? Was that part of it? I know they got the bulletproof glass, but they did not get windows at that time.
No, ma'am. There have been no upgrades on the windows for any part of City Hall.
Okay.
Okay, and to answer Councilman Ailes' question, I'm not an engineer, I am not an architect, but I've inspected a lot of buildings and construction loans and things of that nature for the bank. I will also tell you, we had an earnest discussion regarding the wood windows. And when we left it, that was an item up for discussion, because I agree with you all, it's a Cadillac way to go. Excuse me. I was also heavily involved with the Decorative Arts Center in 1999 when we used Schooley Caldwell to do this. They're well-known. They're on the higher end of the spectrum. And that was a full restoration versus a remodel or that type of thing. And I don't know what the Historical Lancaster Commission said. Did they indicate that must be wood windows versus clad aluminum, vinyl? I don't know that answer.
They had a preference toward the wood windows. They didn't say that it had to be, although because it's already been approved, if we did change it, we would have to go back.
If you're happy with the Mythoff windows, they're not all wood. I think they were approved at some point, and I think they
Yeah,
look
they would
pretty
have been.
nice.
Yeah.
Those are all good questions of council, and this is going to be a continuing story. There'll be more chapters.
We'll follow up.
Going through it, but I do support the project because we can't let this building further deteriorate. I know we've been messing with this for since 2020 or somewhere in through there, a long time. And we've had other people come in, give estimates. In the meantime, the foundation continues to deteriorate. We all know what sandstone does. Something has to be done, and I'm confident that the administration will come back to us when we go further down the road.
Not unhappy with the overall idea of it
Right.
or anything
And
like
your
that.
questions are
I'm
very
talking
well
about details.
stated.
Some of the
Appreciate
details
And we do
seem a
have an
little off.
architect here.
Okay.
And I will just add that this is the first piece. We will be introducing legislation later with Auditor Nettles when we start to look at the financing piece of it. This is just the first piece so that we can go 3 readings and just start the conversation. And I'm more than happy to look into some of your concerns and get back with you. And if anyone else has questions or ideas based on the estimate, I'm happy to entertain any of those and get back with you.
Does the estimate include a sizable contingency?
It
In my
has a
experience,
15%.
How much?
A 15% contingency was
Probably
included in
not
the
enough.
estimate.
Probably not enough on an old building like this. I've
We're
seen
also
them.
gonna have additional in the note. We'll have additional built into the note that we'll bring before council.
Okay, good.
Do we know what kind of energy savings we'd have as far as the building becoming more efficient or greener?
Well, the building's crumbling right now, so any improvement's gonna be efficient. We were replacing replacing lighting and windows, sealing up the exterior, eliminating leaks, eliminating drafts. So I don't know if we can put a dollar amount, but it's significant.
Okay.
There was an energy audit performed, and City Hall was included in that, and I think 2021, but I don't know those numbers off the top of my head. I can try and find that for you if you'd be interested in seeing it.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Any other comments the administration wishes to make? Council? Thank you for the good discussion and your good thoughts. And that is, I've already mentioned Councilman Solly will be my second in 3 readings. Thank you. That concludes the resolutions. We have one ordinance, temporary ordinance 13-25, an ordinance to authorize, an ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of a petition to establish the Lancaster New Community Authority District under Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 349, and that's coming from the committee and Councilman Craigs.
Yes, thank you. This is to authorize the city administration to petition the county commissioners for the creation of a new community authority in the area of west of Pleasantville Road, State Route 188, and south of Rainbow Road. Law Director Hall, would you be able to give us more information on that?
Yeah, so many of you may know there's a single-family residential development looking to go in off of State Route 188 north across from Ox. It's going to be a multi-parcel development, about 333 single-family homes, and these are going to be on the smaller side, so thinking starter or retirement homes. And the hope is that they will create some movement in the market for those folks in the middle who are looking to move up as well. So this is the first large-scale single-family residential development that the city has been able to kind of attract and get interested. The new community authority it was the suggestion of our Economic Development Council to layer potentially a new community authority as well as a TIF on this project it's about $21 million total in public infrastructure improvements. So that's, quite significant investment in the city. Obviously, the city doesn't have the ability to go ahead and put those improvements in and ask for the housing developers to come in and build houses. So the thought was to layer the economic development incentives potentially available to 4-Star to help, bring that project into the city of Lancaster and get those 333 homes. I can answer any specific questions you have right now, but we are planning on bringing in Caleb Bell with Bricker. He is our economic development, our outside counsel for economic development, and he also specializes in public finance and real estate. So he's got significant experience and knowledge with dealing with these types of incentives, and this is his recommendation, and so that's kind of what we're looking to do. The administration has been working with Four Star, Stephanie Bosco, and the port has been working with Four Star to try and bring these houses into the city. Obviously, where they're at, they're well positioned for kids who are going to schools. Thomas Ewing, Medill are in the neighborhood. They're surrounded by other residential uses right now. Independence on the one side, and then is it Brentwoods? Where do you live? Bent Creek, sorry. I couldn't remember the name of it. Bent Creek on the other side. So already surrounded by residential development, and it is the use that I think we anticipated being there originally, residential development, because it's, as you start to get into the hillier side of Lancaster, and more, rural, I guess, based on the fact that it's across the street from Ox. Is there any specific questions that I can help anybody with?
And we need 2 readings because of the timeline, correct?
I apologize, yes. So Four Star has a contract with the property owner. They've been working through this process diligently, but they're at the point where they don't have time for us to do 3 readings, unfortunately. It's going to affect their option with the property owner. And again, I think I detailed in the email that I sent, this is just to start the process. This does not finish anything. There will be multiple steps in this process, and so you will have multiple opportunities to address any, questions or concerns that come up as a result of this. And just one other thing I wanted to mention, I apologize, Joe Bizjack asked me about it last night. He was asking specifically about the parcel that we were listing as the new community authority development parcel. And I explained to him, and it just kind of slipped my mind, because honestly, it doesn't really make a difference about which parcel we choose for the city of Lancaster. It just has to be an undeveloped parcel that's inside the city limits. And so we chose that park parcel that's over there at the back of River Valley Highlands to use as our incentive district. And eventually, some of the profits, some of the funds, like there are new community charges that go along with potentially being in this development. Some of those funds could be used citywide for things like parks, things like firehouses, et cetera. But the main goal is to help make those new developments kind of pay for themselves, so that the existing taxpayers aren't paying for that all that new infrastructure.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
And then Mr. Bizjack will be my second.
Okay. Any further questions, comments?
Chairman Wolfinger, I just want to say, I want to remind everybody, this is the first significant single-family home development that we have. We've got multifamily going on, but we know that our residents need single-family homes, and that's what this development will bring to the community.
Thank you. That concludes the ordinances, and we're moving on to departmental updates. I see no one coming forward. Tonight's meeting prep by President Porter.
We have nothing outside the ordinary business of this evening.
Thank you. And we have any other items for finance? I got another hour. I would entertain, there's no need for executive session. So I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion, a second to adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 We're adjourned. And it is 6:44.
6:44. The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council will commence at 7 o'clock.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our 2 locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. respect for tradition, regard for change.
Great automotive service is just around the corner at the Buckeye family of dealerships. Whether it's Buckeye Nissan at Hilliard, Georgesville Nissan at the Georgesville Auto Mall, Buckeye Honda of Lancaster, Buckeye Toyota of Lancaster, or Buckeye Collision Center in Hilliard. Team Buckeye services all makes and models at each location, utilizing modern practices with hundreds of years of experience, giving you peace of mind. That's how we Buckeye.
the February 24th, 2025 Lancaster City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At the outset of the meeting, I would just remind all council members and other city officials here this evening to make sure that your mics are pulled close to you and you speak into the mic so that we can get the proceedings on camera and also for purposes of our audience this evening. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes.
Here.
Mr. Bizchak.
Here.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Here.
Mrs. Hoop.
Here.
Mr. Luchtenberg.
Here?
Mr. Schoonover.
Here.
Mr. Solly.
Here.
Ms. Teener.
Here.
Mr. Wing.
Here.
And Mr. Wolfinger.
Here.
Let the record reflect that all 10 members of Lancaster City Council are present this evening. We will now move on to the reading and disposing of the journal.
Regular meeting minutes dated February 10th, 2025.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. We'll now move on to reports of city officials.
Multiple emails between council members and Law Director Hall dated February 14th, 2025 regarding the tax increment financing. Email dated February 18th, 2025 regarding Violet Township, City of Lancaster JED expansion petition submitted by Law Director Hall. Email dated February 18th, 2025 regarding Timber Top TIF document for temporary ordinance 1225 submitted by Law Director Hall. Email dated February 20th, 2025 regarding temporary ordinance 13-25 new committee authority petition authorization submitted by Law Director Hall. Email dated February 21st, 2025 regarding Powers Run TIF incentive district notices submitted by Law Director Hall. Email dated February 24th, 2025 explanation of vote on ordinance temporary number 8-25 star submitted by Mr. Ailes. And that's it.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the reports of city officials. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Communications.
Series of emails between Council Clerk Scott and David Hodge of Underhill and Hodge LLC dated February 17, 2025 regarding Blue Label annexation. Email dated February 20th, 2025 regarding Violet Township, City of Lancaster JED expansion petition public hearing notices submitted by Judy Riley of Violet Township and replied by Council Clerk Scott. Email dated February 20th, 2025 regarding 2024 replacement pages for codification submitted by Sally Brown of the Walter H. Drain Company.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the communications.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the communications. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. We have no special presentations or awards this evening. We have no petitions and memorials. At this time, we move to the permission of voters and taxpayers to address council. Do we have any individuals here this evening that wish to address council? Seeing none, we thank you for coming and attending this evening's meeting. Reports of standing committees.
We have Safety Committee agenda dated February 5th, 2025, submitted by Mr. Bizchak. Finance Committee meeting minutes dating February 10th, 2025, submitted by Mr. Wolfinger. Administrative Services Committee minutes dated February 11, 2025, submitted by Mr. Luchtenberg. Code Enforcement and Zoning Committee agenda dated February 19, 2025, submitted by Mr. Solly. Finance Committee agenda minutes dated February 21st, 2025, submitted by Mr. Wolfinger. And Safety Committee agenda and minutes dated February 21st, 2025, submitted by Mr. Bizchak.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the reports of standing committees. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Reports of special committees.
There are no reports of special committees to present.
We have no public hearings this evening. We will now move on to the reading of resolutions, beginning with the third reading of resolutions. First being temporary resolution 11-25.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and to amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor in the police and fire levy fund 2047. This is through safety committee, Mr. Bizjack and Mr. Solly.
Councilmember Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 11-25.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 11-25. Any discussion, council member?
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, this is just the payout for Chief Maffin's retirement.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop? Yes. Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Solly?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 11-25 passes 10-0. Temporary resolution 12-25.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation to purchase rock salt for the 2025-2026 winter season. This is through Public Works Committee, Ms. Teener and Mrs. Kreitz.
Councilmember Teener.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion the council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 1225.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 12-25. Any discussion, Councilmember Teener?
Yes, this is just to purchase rock salt for next winter.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop? Yes. Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Solly?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 12-25 passes 10-0. Temporary resolution 13-25.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into contracts for the purchase of chemicals for use by the Division of Water. This is through Water Pollution Committee, Mr. Wing and Mr. Ailes.
Councilmember Wing.
Mr. President, I move that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution numbered 13-25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 13-25. Discussion, Councilmember Wing.
Yes, this piece and the next piece are both annual pieces for the Division of Water. Very simple. This is for the purchase of chemicals, and the next is for the purchase of pipes and fittings for the year.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop? Yes. Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Solly?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 13-25 passes 10-0. Temporary resolution 14-25.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into contracts for the purchase of pipes and fittings for the use of the Division of Water. This is through Water Pollution Committee, Mr. Wing and Ms. Teener.
Councilmember Wing.
Mr. President, I move that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution numbered 14-25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 14-25. Councilmember Wing, discussion.
I have nothing further to add.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop? Yes. Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Solly?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 14-25 passes 10-0. Temporary resolution 16-25.
A resolution to move existing budget between accounts appropriated from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of appropriations from the county auditor in the Stormwater Sewer Fund 6006. This is through Finance Committee, Mr. Wolfinger and Mr. Ailes.
Councilmember Wolfinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 16-25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 16-25. Any discussion, Councilmember Wolfinger?
Briefly, this is moving $6,484 from one account to another account, which is necessitated due to a retirement.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Leuchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Solly?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 16-25 passes 10-0. We now move on to the second reading of resolutions with temporary resolution 17-25.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the construction of and maintenance and storage facility for use by the Lancaster Fire Department and to declare an emergency. This is through Safety Committee, Mr. Bizjack and Mr. Sully.
Councilmember Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. This will be the second of three readings.
Second of three readings on temporary resolution 17-25. We'll now move on to the first reading of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 18-25.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding for the purchase of Carabine Apex 911 software for the Lancaster Police Department due to sole source provider. Safety Committee, Mr. Bizjack and Ms. Teener.
Councilmember Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading for temporary resolution 18-25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 18-25. Any discussion, Councilmember Bizjack?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion to suspend? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Leuchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Solly?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 18-25 passes 10-0. Councilmember Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that council pass and engross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 18-25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 18-25. Any discussion, Councilmember Bizjack?
As we discussed in the Finance Committee, once again, this is facilitating the purchase of new 911 software for our center since the current software we have is at end of life. That is all, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Leuchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Solly?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 18-25 passes 10-0. Temporary resolution 19-25.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to dispense the competitive bidding and enter into a contract with the Axon from the Sourcewell Cooperative Purchasing Program and to declare an emergency. Once again, Safety Committee, Mr. Bizjack and Mr. Sully.
Councilmember Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading for temporary resolution 19-25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, or to suspend our rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 19-25. Any discussion, Councilmember Bizjack?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion to suspend? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Leuchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Solly?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 19-25 passes 10-0. Councilmember Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 19-25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 19-25. Councilmember Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. As once again we discussed in the Finance Committee, this is to facilitate the purchase of cameras for our cruisers, ensuring safety of both our officers and the public. That is all, Mr. President.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bischak?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Sully?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record, temporary resolution 19-25 passes 10-0. Temporary resolution 20-25.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding and enter into a contract with the Montrose Ford for the purchase of 4 police vehicles for the use by the Lancaster Police Department. This is through Safety Committee, Mr. Bischak and Ms. Teener.
Councilmember Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. This will be the first of 3 readings.
First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 20-25. Temporary resolution 21-25.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor in the general fund 1001. Again, through Safety Committee, Mr. Bischak and Mr. Sully.
Councilmember Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. This will be the first of 3 readings.
First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 21-25. Temporary resolution 22-25.
A resolution to approve then and now certificates for the payment of bills in the general fund 1001 and the police and fire levy fund 2047. This again is through Safety Committee, Mr. Bischak and Ms. Teener.
Councilmember Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading for temporary resolution 22-25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 22-25. Councilmember Bizjack.
I have nothing to say at this time, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion to suspend? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bischak?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Sully?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 22-25 passes 10-0. Councilmember Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 22-25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 22-25. Councilmember Bizjack.
Thank you, Mr. President. As once again we discussed in the Finance Committee, there were some bills that were paid ahead of time before council had a chance to appropriate the funds. This resolution is addressing that and fixing that matter, making our books whole with the city auditor.
Thank you. I know that people are, that the meeting's taking a little long, but I can hear the feedback of people talking up here, so that means it's probably being picked up on camera. So if we could just keep it down just a smidge, I appreciate it. Thank you. Any further discussion on temporary resolution 22-25? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bischak?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Sully?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 22-25 passes 10-0. Temporary resolution 23-25.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund 8034. Complete a fund transfer, increase receipts and appropriations in the Cemetery Fund 2007, and amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor. This is through Public Works Committee, Ms. Teener and Mr. Luchtenberg.
Councilmember Teener.
First of 3 readings.
First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 23-25. Temporary resolution 24-25.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding for a sole source provider for corrosion inhibitors. This is through Water Pollution Committee, Mr. Wing and Ms. Teener.
Councilmember Wing.
This will be the first of 3 readings.
First of 3 readings on temporary resolution 24-25. Temporary resolution 25-25.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise for bid and enter into a contract for the City Hall renovation project. This is through Finance Committee, Mr. Wolfinger and Mr. Sully.
Councilmember Wolfinger.
Excuse me. First of 3 readings.
First
I
of,
apologize.
no, first of 3 readings on temporary resolution 25-25. That concludes our reading of resolutions for this evening, and we're going to now move in to the reading of ordinances. beginning with the third reading of temporary ordinance 7-25.
An ordinance to authorize the mayor to enter into a school compensation agreement for income tax sharing between Lancaster City School District and the City of Lancaster and to declare an emergency. This is through Finance Committee, Mr. Schoonover, or Mr. Wolfinger and Mr. Solly.
Councilmember Wolfinger.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 7-25.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 7-25. Any discussion, Councilmember Wolfinger?
Just to remind everybody, this was an ordinance to put into place as an agreement between Lancaster City Schools and the City of Lancaster dealing with an income tax sharing agreement.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. A.
Yes.
Mr. Bizjak?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Solly?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Sorry.
Temporary ordinance 7-25 passes 10-0. Temporary ordinance 8-25 has been withdrawn. Temporary ordinance 8-25 star.
Oh, I'm sorry. An ordinance to amend the permanent ordinance 51-24, the management pay ordinance, and to declare an emergency. This is through Administrative Service Committee, Mr. Luchtenberg and Mr. Wolfinger.
Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to replace ordinance temporarily numbered 8-25, replacing it with ordinance temporarily numbered 8-25 star, as given to the clerk in writing prior to tonight's meeting.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to replace temporary ordinance 8-25 with temporary ordinance 8-25 star as provided to the clerk prior to tonight's meeting. Any further discussion?
Yes, I'd like to ask the Service Safety Director to address this one.
Thank you, Councilman Luchtenberg. As indicated in an email to council last week, we have our water pollution control superintendent that is retiring as of February 28th. So the STAR version allows us to hire a new water pollution control superintendent. So if you recall, several years ago, our water pollution control superintendent, Mr. Nixon, was actually charged with overseeing the water pollution control department and the water department. So he had two departments. Because of this, they gave him a separate pay under Section 2 of the pay ordinance to accommodate him covering both departments. We have since then separated the departments, and we now have Mr. Drum that is overseeing the water department. And so now that Mr. Nixon is retiring, we would like to move the water pollution control department, that superintendent, back into the regular pay ordinance under Section 1. Since we didn't know this back in November when we originally passed this ordinance, that number was 0 employees. So as you'll see in the whereas, we will put the new superintendent to 1 at the pay range 28 in Section 1, and then remove Section 2, water pollution control superintendent, in its entirety as of February 28th when Mr. Nixon retires.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion to replace? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjak?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Solly?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to replace temporary ordinance 8-25 with temporary ordinance 8-25 star passes 10-0. Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 8-25 star.
Second.
We have a motion and second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 8-25 star. Any further discussion?
None.
Councilmember Ailes.
As I addressed earlier today, I sent you all my feelings on this ordinance, and I outlined them pretty clearly. one of the things that I think we need to consider is that we could accomplish the same thing that the administration is trying to accomplish, and that's save money by simply, if the person that we think is going to get this job gets this job, she's already been with the city for 9 years, so she's going to max out in steps immediately. If we change it to 23, if we change it to 22, she will be at step 7, range 22, which is $98,000. We discussed this just before.
I think it's 99,000,
Yeah,
but right,
it's
you're,
around.
yes, around 99,000.
If we leave it alone, leave it at range 24, we have, the administration has the discretion of placing the new person into the position at a lower step. And we could pick a step and say it's step 4. Step 4 in range 24 is actually less than step 7 in range 22. Now, if you all aren't confused yet, hang on. That doesn't save anyone any money immediately, and it doesn't make sense to me to do that, because if you put the new person in at the top of her range at step 7, she has nowhere to go. She is maxed out as far as range increases. She will still get cost of living increases. Does this make sense, or are you following me at all? It made perfect sense when I prepared it. So what I'm asking you to do is vote no, leave it alone, let the administration use their discretion to place the new person where they think that she needs to be, and move on. So I'm voting no.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Mr. President.
Mr. Mann.
So those points are well taken, and they're accurate to the point that the other consideration is range 24 tops out at $6,000 more than range 22. So you are saving money when the person tops out in their steps. But also, a survey of this job in the Central Ohio region indicates that we're paying more than most cities are paying for the same type of job. Most of the salaries are in the $80,000 range for this position. None of them are $105,000 that I've seen. The director did some discussions with, a local bank teller is in the $72,000 range. That, I believe the $105,000 is a premium salary for a position that doesn't have the responsibility that other departments have. And that's why we made this recommendation. It wasn't targeted at an individual. It wasn't targeted at who might or might not get the job. It was targeted at being more fair to the taxpayers and reducing the burden down the road. That's the only reason we made this recommendation. It's something I think I was elected to do, to look at what we're paying people and make sure we pay them fairly, but also, are we paying, in some cases, too much for some positions that don't have the responsibility of other positions making similar salaries? So that is certainly my opinion. You may have something different, but I think we all should look, every penny matters. The difference between putting a person in a step and letting them get to their ultimate max at 7 years, so you put her back at year 4 and let them move through in 3 years they're at 105, or 3 years they're at 99. So there is a savings to the taxpayer. I personally would have probably recommended going down to, if we were looking at comparables, maybe to a 20, but also we considered the impact on the employees. And we do want them to be paid at a greater rate than their subordinates. They're responsible for the operation of the department. So in trying to balance things and be fair to everybody, this was our recommendation, and I stand by the recommendation.
Can I follow up?
Councilmember Ailes.
I just taken over for Tom Stoughton at the end of 2022 or whatever. Anyway, I was here in time for budget negotiations, and the administration at the time, and you, Mr. Mayor, as the Finance Committee Chairman, mentioned a survey, brought the survey up, and recommended that we move a number of these positions in the management area up more than the cost of living, because we were underpaying them, and that we were afraid that we were going to lose good people. So we agreed with you 2 years ago, 2.4 years ago. We went through we've gone through this process. We haven't looked at these numbers, and now I've heard that the survey was flawed. I didn't hear that when we were being presented the information in the survey. And you just mentioned another survey, and I've been looking at the same survey. If it's the same things that, Carrie, you've been sharing with me, there's really nothing that I've seen that compares to what the superintendent of the Utilities Collection Office does. I haven't seen anything that comes close. A bank branch manager was just an idea. They don't have people in the field reading meters, checking for gas leaks for the gas department. I understand they go through the same training as the gas department employees they do. I mean, that's a pretty important role in the community. They probably have more daily interaction with citizens of the city of Lancaster in this office than, other than the police and fire department, than probably just about anybody. So I think that if we take that view, then I think it's the wrong view. I think that we have a department and a department head that built a department, a very strong department, and we used the opportunity of her retirement to make a change and didn't handle it very well, because it was announced before she retired, which caused hard feelings.
Yeah.
So I think there's been a lot of mistakes made, and I don't want to make another one. I don't think that it's smart to do this at this point, and I'm going to respectfully disagree.
Thank you, Councilmember Ailes. Councilmember Wolfinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to clarify fairness or whatever. The Service Safety Director, how many applicants did you receive for the position?
We have not posted this position yet because we were waiting to finalize the pay ordinance. I didn't want to post for one pay range and then not hire at that pay range. So we have not posted this position yet.
Okay, because I was wondering if the applicants were aware that that is the new pay grade, 22 versus 24. Because if we advertise at 24, now we're going to 23, I have a little concern about that. But you have not posted it.
We have not advertised, and I will say the one internal applicant that Councilman Ailes is referring to, I have had this discussion with that employee and discussed the pay range and what we were looking at and what was proposed to City Council.
So they are aware.
They are aware, yes.
Of the potential change.
And if I may just maybe address Councilman Ailes, your concern, I will own that, yes, we should have waited until after the retirement, and my apologies. I've expressed that to you before. That was my mistake, and that was definitely a learning curve for me and a lesson learned that the intent was never to hurt any feelings. It was never anything personal. And I've said this before, the mayor and I, every time we've had someone retire or through attrition, we've been going through the same process, and we've removed the person out of every job description and just really looked at the position descriptions, the job responsibilities, how many people they're managing, and correlating that to other positions throughout Central Ohio that are managing similar number of employees that have similar job responsibilities, similar job duties, and really taking all of that into consideration when we're making recommendations. applaud everything that you've done and everything that you've brought forth to me, because you've helped me learn a lot through this process and ways to look at this more in the future. Things that I didn't even know were available to me as resources that I'll take into consideration moving forward. And again, I appreciate your stance and I respect your decision. But as the mayor mentioned, I mean, we brought this to you as council because we truly felt this was in the best interest of the citizens and the city. And whatever council decides, we will stand by that and we will respect that decision. We were just trying to do our due diligence.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. President,
Councilmember Lechtenberg.
I was unaware of Councilman Ailes' email today, and I wonder if it would be wise for us to table this motion for a meeting, just to allow for more interaction on it.
We can entertain a motion to table. I wouldn't recommend.
Would you feel good with that, Larry?
No,
Service Safety Director.
it's going to pass.
If I may, I would like a decision, and again, if you vote against it, I will respect that
agree with her.
decision. I would
Delaying
just,
it 2 weeks ain't gonna.
I would prefer to have something passed or not passed this evening so that we can post this position. Right now, I have someone in an acting position because I can't even post the position until we know what we're paying. So I would like to have a decision so that we can post this and start interviewing for a permanent replacement.
Okay.
She is being paid right now at range 24, the current range.
Correct, because that's what's in the city ordinance.
Auditor Nettles.
And just for a point of clarification, this would also stop them for the water pollution, correct?
Correct.
Superintendent.
That is correct.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Teener.
Actually, you know, what you just said, I think moving forward, because this has happened before, these need to be separated. Because this has happened before. I think it was a city planner and something else one time. And so I really think moving forward, things like this need to be separated out. I think we need to have two different ordinances for that, because they are different discussions.
I'll refer to the law director. With it being the same ordinance, I don't know that we could do it separately, but I'll defer to the law director
I'm
on
just
that.
saying moving forward after
Yeah.
this.
There was no discussion about it doing it tonight.
Beg your pardon?
Right.
I said there's no discussion. She's not raising the point of
Oh.
doing it tonight. She's saying in the future.
So would
Because this
you
has
not
happened
like me to
before.
address that,
Yes.
President Porter?
Excuse me?
Would you not like me to address
You
that?
can if you
Okay.
wish.
I just want to say, it would be incredibly difficult to do because you're trying to, you've got one piece that's being read and another piece right after it that changes that piece. So in terms of, publishing our legislation like the clerk of council has to do, it would be really confusing for the public probably to try and do both of those things. And then just when they're enacted, we'd have to make sure that one comes after the other. It creates a lot of problems. It's fine if you want to separate them in time, by some period, whether it's, a week even, or a council meeting even, which is typically 2 weeks, we can do that. But just having them at the same time on the same agenda would be really confusing. Sorry.
Thank you. Any further discussion on temporary ordinance 8-1? Service Safety Director Woody.
Was I waving big enough?
Yeah, you were. I was trying
Just
to get
add
my
that,
thought out, but yeah.
I mean, to Councilman Teener, I think in a perfect world, yes, I would agree to have them separate. Unfortunately, when they both retired at the same time, it made it a little more difficult. Had we known ahead of time, maybe, it would have been easier to do that separately, and I can make a note to try and do that separately in the future. But for now, to try and do it separately, we would have to delay hiring one or the other because we can't post
Well, I
until
mean,
it's
I just
allowed in our
remember
ordinance.
the one time we had a city planner and somebody else at it was on the same thing. It was totally separate. I think I voted no. Do you remember that?
Yes,
And
I
it was
remember.
totally separate. And so it kind of made no sense to.
If we
know.
can stop having so many retirements all at once, I am happy to
Maybe
try and
there's a
keep them
reason they're
separate in the future.
retiring.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the discussion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes,
No.
Mr. Bizjack,
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop,
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Solly,
Yes.
Ms. Teener,
Abstain.
Mr. Wing,
Yes.
and Mr. Wolfinger.
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 8-25 passes to 1 with 1 abstention. We'll now move on to the second reading of ordinances, beginning with temporary ordinance 9-25.
An ordinance to repeal and replace Lancaster Codified Ordinance Part 9, Streets, Utilities, and Public Services Code, Chapter 937, Waste Removal. This is through Service Committee, Mr. Ailes and Mrs. Hoop.
Councilmember Hoop.
Second of 3 readings.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember
all right.
Ailes. Sorry about that. Second of 3 readings on temporary ordinance 9-25. Temporary ordinance 12-25. It's star, but you read it as it is.
Okay. An ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of a cooperative agreement among the Lancaster Port Authority, the City of Lancaster, Ohio, Lancaster Development Company, LLC, and the Huntington National Bank, and authorizing the appropriation of tax increment financing funds for payment of debt services with respect to a maximum aggregate principal amount of $6 million of Port Authority revenue bonds to be issued to pay costs of public infrastructure improvements, authorizing the execution and delivery of a TIF administration agreement between Argus Growth Consultants, LTD, and the city, authorizing and approving related matters and declaring an emergency. This is through Economic Development Committee, Mrs. Hoop and Mrs. Kreitz.
Yes, Law Director Hall, given that this is listed for 3 readings and we're on the second one, do we need to do the motion to replace tonight, or should we wait until the 3rd reading?
You don't have to. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference. We didn't change the title, and that's all that has to be read by law. So you can wait until the next meeting if you'd like.
Okay. Councilmember Hoop.
Lovely. So second of 3 readings.
Second of 3 readings on temporary ordinance 12-25. We now move on to the first reading of ordinances, beginning with temporary ordinance 13-25.
An ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of a petition to establish the Lancaster new Community Authority District under Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 349. This is through Law Committee, Mrs. Kreitz and Mr. Bizjack.
Councilmember Kreitz.
First of 2 readings.
First of 2 readings on temporary ordinance 13-25. Tabled legislation, we're leaving that on the table, or is that the recommendation?
Yes, sir. I reached out to South Central Power, specifically Kyle, and I cannot remember his last name to save my life at the moment. I apologize, Kyle. But he advised that they were still working on the language that they wanted to propose to City Council. So just as soon as he provides that to us, I will pass that on to all of you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That concludes our reading of legislation for this evening. Yes. We have unfinished business. Do any council members have any unfinished business they'd like to bring before council this evening? Hearing none, we will now move on to new business. And we do have new business this evening, if you would like to read what we've got.
We have a liquor license for Villa Nail and Spa, LLC.
Okay, so we've received communication that a new liquor license has been applied for. Law Director Hall, do we have to vote to let that go, or if we don't do anything, it just moves forward, correct? Is this for purposes of an objection?
No, this is not for purposes of an objection. Well, I mean, technically we can object, yes, because it's the issuance of a new permit. But you have to reply one way or the other, so you need to take a vote to let the clerk know how to respond to the Division of Liquor Control.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I would entertain a motion now, either way, to either recommend or not recommend the liquor permit at this location. There's been no indication of any issues with this location because there's not been a permit before. So there's nothing really as a basis that would serve as an objection. So I would take,
Do we make a motion?
yes, make a motion to
Oh, yeah.
To approve? Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. So that communication will be communicated back to the Division of Liquor Control. We will now move on to the announcements of scheduled meetings.
Thank you. I had, the next regular sessions of council is March 10th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. in council chambers here. And then March 24th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. again here in council chambers.
Special scheduled meetings.
We have none.
Regularly scheduled committee meetings.
Service Committee, March 7th at 8 a.m. at City Hall, 1897 Conference Room. Finance Committee, March 10th at 6 p.m. here in council chambers. Public Works Committee, March 14th at 7:30 a.m. City Hall, 1897 Conference Room. Law Committee, March 14th at 9 a.m. City Hall, 1897 Conference Room. Water Pollution Control Service Committee, March 17th at 7:30 a.m. at City Hall, 1897 Conference Room.
Thank you. Reading of bills.
I have MNC for $118.18.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion, we pay the bill.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pay the bill. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We have no need of an executive session this evening. I will now take a motion.
President Porter, if I may, I'm sorry. I
Yes.
tried to get you under new business.
Okay.
I just wanted to publicly thank Joyce Harvey, our local historian. If you did not see it, she did a great article in the newspaper about the 50th anniversary of our police department. So if you've not seen that, I would encourage you to look at it. Had some great pictures. It was a great article, and so a huge thanks to Joyce Harvey for doing that.
Thank you. Anything further? Anybody I missed? If not, I'll take a motion.
Mr. President, I'd like to make that motion, we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you for attending tonight's meeting. Please make sure you sign your legislation before you leave.